Chapter 2. There's this house. It's not unlike many other houses. Imagine what a house looks like. It is also quite unlike many other houses. Imagine this house again. Given that it is simultaneously not unlike and unlike other houses, it is exactly like all houses. One way it is not unlike other houses is its shape. It has a house-like shape. That's definitely a house. People might say if shown a picture of it. One way it is unlike other houses is also its shape. It has a subtly unnatural shape. That's definitely a house, but there's something else, something beautiful inside that house. People might say if shown a picture of it. I don't know if beautiful is the right word. It's more like... It's actually upsetting me now. Please stop showing me that picture. Please, those same people might beg a few moments later. It is a terrible, terrible beauty that I do not understand. Please stop. Okay, the person showing the people the picture might reply, because that person might be good and caring. It is hard to say who is good and caring when you know nothing about a person except that they show other people pictures of houses, but there's no sense in going through life presuming awful things about people you do not know. It would be safe to assume that the house is an enclosed structure owned and built by people. It would be weird to assume that the house has a personality, a soul. Why would anyone assume that? It is true, it does, but that was weird to assume that. Never assume that kind of thing. Another way it is unlike other houses is its thoughts. Most houses do not think. This house has thoughts. Those thoughts are not visible in a picture, nor in a person, but they find their way into the world, through dreams mostly. While a person sleeps, the house might suddenly have a thought. Top is not an emotional catalyst. It's practical and bland. No one cries at any shade of top. Or another thought, like, OMG, time. What is time even? And the sleeping person might experience that thought too. These thoughts may also be shared in the shower. Grumpy thoughts. Angry thoughts. Thoughts that should be unthought before interacting with the public. Thoughts like low guttural growl, or knuckles crack, fists clench, teeth tighten, eyes stop letting in any new information, and water runs down a rigid face. The thoughts are everywhere. Sometimes they are quite literal and utilitarian. There's a rodent chewing on some drywall behind the headboard could be one such thought. Another way it is not unlike other houses is that it houses people. It houses a woman, for instance. Imagine a woman. Good work. It also houses a boy, not quite a man. He's 15. You know how it is. Imagine a 15-year-old boy. Nope, that was not right at all. Try again. No. No. Okay, stop. He is tall. He's skinny, with short hair and long teeth that he deliberately hides when he smiles. He smiles more than he thinks he does. Imagine a 15-year-old boy. No. Again. No, not close. He has fingers that move like they have no bones. He has eyes that move like he has no patience. He has a tongue that changes shape every day. He has a face that changes shape every day. He has a skeletal structure and coloring and hair that change every day. He seems different than you remember. He is always unlike he was before. Imagine. Good. That's actually pretty good. His name is Josh Creighton. Her name is Diane Creighton. She is Josh's mother. She sees herself in Josh. Josh looks like a lot of things. He changes his physical form constantly. In this way, he is unlike most boys his age. He thinks he is several things at once, many of them contradictory. In this way, he is like most boys his age. Sometimes Josh takes the form of a curve-billed thrasher, or a kangaroo, or a Victorian-era wardrobe. Sometimes he amalgamates his looks, fish head with ivory tusks and monarch wings. "You have changed so much since I last saw you," people often say to him. People say that to all teenagers, but they mean it more with Josh. Josh doesn't remember how he looked the last time each person saw him. Like most teenagers, he always was what he happens to be at that moment, until he never was that. There was a girl Josh liked who only liked Josh when he was bipedal. Josh does not like always being bipedal and found this news disappointing. There was a boy Josh liked who liked Josh when he was a cute animal. Josh always likes being a cute animal, but Josh's subjective sense of the word cute was different than the boy's. This was another disappointment for Josh, and also for the boy, who did not find giant centipedes cute at all. Diane loved Josh for all the things he appeared to be. She herself did not change forms, only showing the gradual differences that come with gradual changes of age. Josh sometimes tried to fool Diane by taking the form of an alligator, or a cloud of bats, or a house fire. Diane knew to be on guard at first, just in case there really was a dangerous reptile, or a swarm of rabid flying mammals, or a house on fire. But once she understood the situation, she was calm, and she loved him for who he was and how he looked. No matter what he looked like. She was, after all, the mother of a teenager. "Please stop shrieking and swarming into the cupboard," she would say. It was important to set boundaries. Josh sometimes appears human. When he does, he is often short, chubby-cheeked, pudgy, wearing glasses. "Is that how you see yourself, Josh?" Diane once asked. "Sometimes," Josh replied. "Do you like the way you look?" Diane once followed up. "Sometimes," Josh replied. Diane did not press Josh further. She felt his terse answers were a sign he did not want to talk much. Josh wished his mother talked to him more. His short answers were a sign he didn't know how to socialize well. "What?" Josh asked on a Tuesday evening. He had smooth violet skin, a pointed chin, angular thin shoulders. The television was not on. A textbook was open, but not being read. A phone was lit up, a sharp thumb tapping across its keyboard. "Come talk," Diane said from the cracked door. She did not want to open it all the way. It was not her room. She was trying very hard. She had sold a tear to Jackie that day. It had felt good to have someone explicitly value something that she did. Also, expenses had been higher than usual that month, and she needed the money. She was, after all, a single parent. "About what?" "Anything." "I'm studying." "Are you studying? I don't want to bother you if you're studying." "Ping," the phone added. "If you're studying, then I'll go," she said, pretending she did not hear the phone. "What?" Josh asked on some other evening. It was a Tuesday, or it was not a Tuesday. His skin was a pale orange, or it was deep navy, or there were thick bristles that plumed from just below his eyes, or his eyes were not visible at all because of the shade of his ram-like horns. This was most evenings. This was the incremental repetition of parenting. The television was not on. A textbook was open, but not being read. A phone was lit up. "How are you doing?" Diane sometimes said. Sometimes she said, "What's going on?" Sometimes she said, "Just checking on you." "Josh," Diane sometimes said, standing at his door in the evening. Sometimes she knocked. "Josh," she sometimes repeated, following a certain amount of silence. "Josh," She sometimes did not repeat, following a second amount of silence. Dot, 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 Josh sometimes replied. Not out loud, but like in a comic book speech bubble. He pictured other things he could say, but didn't know how. For the most part, I do not like taffeta, the house thought, and Diane shared that thought. Josh, Diane said, sitting in the passenger seat of her burgundy Ford hatchback. What? Said the wolf spider in the driver's seat. If you're going to learn how to drive, you're going to need to be able to reach the pedals. The wolf spider elongated, and two of his middle legs extended to the floor of the vehicle, gently touching the pedals. And see the road too, Josh. A human head with the face and hair of a 15-year-old boy emerged from the body of the spider, and the abdomen filled out into something of a primate-like torso. The legs remained spindly and long. He thought he looked cool driving a car as a wolf spider. He did look cool, although it was difficult to control the car. It was important to him that he look cool while driving, although he would not have been able to articulate why. Diane stared him down. Josh took a fully human shape, save for a few feathers on his back and shoulders. Diane saw them poking out from underneath his shirt sleeves, but decided that not all battles are worth fighting. Human form when driving the car. Diane saw herself in Josh. She had been a teenager once. She understood emotions. She empathized. She didn't know with what, but she empathized. Josh huffed, but Diane reminded him that if he wanted to drive her car, he would play by her rules, which involved not being a 3-inch-long wolf spider. Diane reminded him of his bike and how that was a perfectly reasonable form of transportation. Diane's task of teaching her son to drive took an additional patience, not just because of Josh's insistence on constant reassessment of his physical identity, but also because the car was of manual transmission. Imagine teaching a 15-year-old how to drive a car with manual transmission. First you have to press down the clutch, then you have to whisper a secret into one of the cup holders. In Diane's case, this was easy, as she was not a very social or public person, and most any mundane thing in her life could be a secret. In Josh's case, this was hard, because for teenagers, most every mundane thing in their lives is a secret that they do not like sharing in front of their parents. Then after the clutch and the secret, the driver has to grab the stick shift, which is a splintered wood stake wedged into the dashboard, and shake it until something happens. Anything, really. And then simultaneously type a series of code numbers into a keyboard on the steering wheel. All this while sunglasses-wearing agents from a vague yet menacing government agency sit in a heavily tinted black sedan across the street taking pictures, and occasionally waving. This is a lot of pressure on a first-time driver. Josh often got frustrated with his mother. This was because Diane was not the best teacher. This was also because Josh was not the best student. There were other reasons as well. Josh, you need to listen to me, Diane would say. I get it, okay? Josh would say, not getting it at all. Diane enjoyed arguing with Josh about driving because it was time spent talking, having a relationship. It was not easy being a mother with a teenager. Josh enjoyed this time too, but not consciously. On the surface, he was miserable. He just wanted to drive a car, not do all of the things it takes to be able to drive a car, like having a car and learning to drive it. And sometimes he would say, "Why can't my dad come teach me?" because he knew that question would hurt her. Then he would feel bad about hurting her. Diane would feel bad too. They would sit in the car, feeling bad. "You're doing a good job," Diane once said to Josh, in relation to nothing, only trying to fill a silence. So every other time I'm not doing a good job, Josh thought, because he didn't understand the context of her statement. "Thanks," Josh said out loud, trying to fill the silence with graciousness. "You still need to work on a lot of things," Diane did not say. "I'm sorry your father isn't here," she also did not say. "But I am trying so hard. I am, Josh. I am. She did not say. As far as things go, her self-control was pretty good. "I'm really good at driving," Josh often thought, even as he veered too close to highway barriers, rolled wheels up on curbs, and failed to yield to hooded figures, resulting in mandatory citywide ennui for hours. Night Vale's traffic laws are Byzantine and kept to a need-to-know basis with civilian drivers. Their driving lessons often ended in a good job and a thanks, and a brief pause and a divergence into separate silent rooms. Later, Diane would knock and say, "Josh," and Josh would or would not reply. Diane hurt. She was not consciously aware that she hurt, but she hurt. "Josh," she said, so many times a day, for so many different reasons. Josh loved his mother, but he did not know why. Diane loved her son, and she did not care why. Another way the house is unlike other houses is it has a faceless old woman secretly living in it, although that is not important to this story. Chapter 3. King City, said the paper. Jackie had never felt fear in her entire life. She had felt caution and unease and sadness and joy, which are all similar to fear, but she had never felt fear itself. She did not feel it then. She got to the work of closing, wiping down the bathroom sink, sweeping the floor, and adjusting the thick burlap covering up items that were forbidden or secret, like the time machine that Larry Leroy had stolen from the Museum of Forbidden Technologies, and the pens and pencils, writing utensils having long been outlawed in Night Vale for reasons of public well-being, although everyone still surreptitiously used them. The paper was still in her hand. She hadn't realized it, had been going about everything without realizing, but there it was. Still there, dull pencil, smudged, hurried handwriting. She put it down on the cracked glass of the countertop. Now it was time to feed those items that were alive. Some of the items were alive. Some of them were dogs, and some weren't. There were lights now, in the desert. Low bubbles of light coming and going. She had never seen them before. She ignored them, as she ignored all things that were not part of the small circle of her days. There were always things she had never seen before in Night Vale. There was the man she passed in the desert, using a pair of scissors on the top of a cactus, as if he were cutting its hair. There was the cactus that had a full head of hair. There was the day where the small crack that's always visible in the sky suddenly opened up, and several pterodactyls flew out. Later it was revealed they were just pteranodons, and all the panic was for nothing. She finished her check of the inventory. The paper was in her hand. "King City," said the paper. "How did it get here?" "How did this get here?" she asked. The dogs did not respond, nor did anything less sentient. She put the paper in a drawer in the back of the room, in the desk she did not use for the work she did not have. There was nothing more to be done to close the shop. If she were honest, and she tried to be, she had been looking for excuses not to leave. If she were honest, and she tried to be, the floor had been clean enough to begin with. A glance out the window. The low bubbles of light in the desert were gone. Nothing there but a distant airplane crawling across the sky, red blinking lights, vulnerable in the vast empty, faint red beacons flashing the message, "Hello, a small island of life up here, very close to space. Pray for us. Pray for us." The paper was in her hand. "King City," the paper said. Jackie felt fear for the first time, and she did not know what it was. For the first time in a long time, she wished she had a friend to call. She had had friends in high school, she knew that, although the memory of high school was distant and vague. The rest of her friends hadn't stopped at 19. They had gotten older, living full lives. They had tried to stay in touch, but it was difficult as they moved on to adult careers and kids and retirement, and Jackie just kept being 19 years old. "So, still 19? Noel Connolly had said, when they spoke on the phone for the final time. Her disapproval was clear in her voice. "Oh, Jackie, did you ever think of just turning 20? They had been friends since sophomore Spanish class, but Noelle had been 58 at the point she had finally asked Jackie that question, and spoke in tones that felt sickeningly parental to Jackie. Jackie had said so, and Noelle had become openly condescending, and they had both hung up, and she and Noelle had never spoken again. People who grow older and think they're so wise, she thought, like time means anything at all. The radio came on by itself as she stood there, paper in hand. It always did at this time of night. Cecil Palmer, the host of Night Vale Community Radio, spoke to her. News, community calendar, traffic. She listened when she could to Cecil. Most of the town did. At home, Jackie had a small radio, only about 2 feet wide, 1.5 feet tall. It was the lightweight portable edition, under 14 pounds, with a mother-of-pearl handle and a sharply angled, open-beaked eagles carved into the upper corners. Her mother had gotten it for her whenever her 16th birthday was, however long ago that had been, and it was one of Jackie's favorite possessions, along with her record collection, which she never listened to because she didn't have a license to own a record player yet. Cecil Palmer spoke of the horrors of everyday life. Nearly every broadcast told a story of impending doom or death, or worse, a long life lived in fruitless fear of doom or death. It wasn't that Jackie wanted to know all of the bad news in the world. It was that she loved sitting in the dark of her bedroom, swaddled in blankets and invisible radio waves. Look, life is stressful. This is true everywhere. But life in Night Vale is more stressful. There are things lurking in the shadows, not the projections of a worried mind, but literal things lurking, literally, in shadows. Conspiracies are hidden in every storefront, under every street, and floating in helicopters above. And with all that, there is still the bland tragedy of life. Births, deaths, comings, goings, the gulf of subjectivity and bravado between us and everyone we care about. All is sorrow, as a man once said without really doing much about it. But when Cecil talked, it was possible to let some of that go. To let go of the worries, to let go of the questions, to let go of letting or going. The slip of paper, however, Jackie could not let go of. She opened her hand and watched it flutter to the floor. She stared at it. It was on the floor. ... The blank back of the paper said, not literally, but like in a comic book speech bubble. She stared, and it sat and sat, and then she blinked her eyes and it was back in her hand. King City, it said. This is getting me nowhere, she said, to no one, or to the dogs, or to the thing that lurked in her corner. She tried calling Cecil at the station to see if he had heard anything about a man in a tan jacket holding a deerskin suitcase. She couldn't remember Cecil ever mentioning a person by that description on his show, but it was worth a shot. One of the station interns picked up, promising to take a message, but who knew if the poor kid would even survive long enough to deliver it. That's okay, Jackie said. Hey, listen, I think the Arby's is hiring. Have you considered that? Their death rate is really low for the area. But the kid was already hanging up. Oh well, not Jackie's job to worry about the life of someone foolhardy enough to be a community radio intern. The shop was well and truly closed. At this point, if she waited any longer, she might as well lay out a sleeping bag and spend the night. Which, nope. So she stepped out into the parking lot, jumpy for sure. There was a black sedan with tinted windows at the end of the lot. The windows cracked down enough for her to see 2 sunglassed agents of a vague yet menacing government agency watching her intently. One of them had a camera that kept going off, but the agent didn't seem to know how to deactivate the flash. The light against the tinted windows made the shots worthless, and the agent cursed and tried again, and it flashed again. Jackie waved goodnight to them, as she always did. Maybe she would take the Mercedes home, drive with the roof down, see how fast she could make it go before the sheriff's secret police stopped her. But she wouldn't, of course. She walked to her car, a blue Mazda coupe with double red stripes that had been washed, presumably at some point before she owned it. King City, she said. The paper in her hand agreed. It had been a mistake to accept what the man in the tan jacket had offered her. She didn't know what it was, or what it meant, or what information it was trying to convey and to whom, but she knew that it had changed something. The world was slipping into her life, and she had to push it out, starting with the slip of paper and the man in the tan jacket. She announced her intentions, as all Night Vale citizens must. "I will find the man in the tan jacket, and I will make him take this piece of paper back," she announced. "If I could do that without having to learn anything about him or about what this paper means, that would be just ideal." The agents in the car, holding index fingers to earpieces, dutifully wrote this down. Out in the desert, bubbles of light, low to the ground, the echo of a crowd arguing and then cheering. For a moment, a tall building, all glass and angles and business, where there had definitely been nothing but sand. And then it was gone, and there were more lights, shifting, warping the air around them, and the echo of crowds, and the lights. She put the car in reverse and pulled onto the highway, tossing the slip of paper out the window and watching with satisfaction as it fluttered into the night behind her, and then, snapping her fingers, caught the paper between them, where it had always been. The voice of Night Vale. Cecil. Hello, listeners. Cecil here, your voice from the darkness, the quiet whisperer in your empty night, speaking to you now from a booth at the Night Vale community radio station. Here to bring you all the news and community goings-on that you need to know, and hide from you all forbidden and dangerous knowledge. Now, the news. There are lights above our town, Night Vale. I am not talking here about the stars. No one knows what the stars are, or what they intend, but they have remained in mostly the same order, and have indicated no harm for as long as anyone around here can remember. Astronomers keep trying to explain that stars are distant suns in distant galaxies, but of course you have to take everything astronomers say with a grain of salt. But these new lights are not stars. They are low bubbles of light coming and going overhead. They are not the same lights that sometimes hover hundreds of feet above the Arby's. Those lights are different. We understand those lights. The new lights, however, are concerning. Witnesses reported the lights changing colors when commented on. Some people would say things like, "Oh, look at those orange lights," and then point. And suddenly the lights would be yellow, and those people friends would then respond, "No, that's definitely a yellow," but then they'd go back to being orange, and so on. That was one such witness account given by Chris Brady and Stuart Robinson of Old Town Night Vale. Chris added, "What do you think? They're orange, right?" The lights then turned yellow again, and Stuart concluded with, "Why is it so important to you to always be right, Christopher?" before storming off, followed by a very apologetic Chris. So far the lights seem harmless unless you're directly under them, in which case they're the opposite of harmless, whatever that means to you. Last night, at a press conference, the City Council reminded everyone that the dog park is there for our community enjoyment and use, and so it is important that no one enter, look at, or think about the dog park. They are adding a new advanced camera system to keep an eye on the great black walls of the dog park at all times, and if anyone is caught trying to enter it, they will be forced to enter it and will never be heard from again. If you see hooded figures in the dog park, no, you didn't. The hooded figures are perfectly safe and should not be approached at any costs. The City Council ended the conference by devouring a raw potato in quick, small bites of their sharp teeth and rough tongues. No follow-up questions were asked, although there were a few follow-up screams. We have also received word via encrypted radio pulses about the opening of a new store, Lenny's Bargain House of Garden Wares and Machine Parts, which until recently was that abandoned warehouse the government was using for the highly classified and completely secret tests I was telling you about last week. Lenny's will serve as a helpful news source for all needs involving landscaping and lawn decorating materials, and also as a way for the government to unload all the machines and failed tests and dangerous substances that otherwise would be wasted on things like safe disposal or burying in a concrete tomb until the sun goes out. Get out to Lenny's for their big grand opening sale. Find 8 government secrets and get a free kidnapping and personality reassignment so that you'll forget you found them. And now, it's time for the Children's Fun Fact Science Corner. Here is what we know about sentience. Sand is sentient. The desert is sentient. The sky is not sentient. Plants are intermittently sentient. Dogs are the most sentient. We are not sentient. The planet as a whole is sentient. The parts that make up that whole are not sentient. Wholes are sentient. We are not sentient. Gift cards are sentient until they expire. States in which it is illegal for gift cards to expire have created immortal sentience. Money is not sentient. The concept of private property is sentient. Sand is sentient. The desert is sentient. We are not sentient. This has been the Children's Fun Fact Science Corner. Is your identity safe, listeners? With so much information being stored in databases these days, it's uncertain how we can feel secure that our identities are our own. There are scams galore to try to steal your credit card numbers, social security numbers, city citizen personal numbers, neighborhood resident tracking numbers, and so on. Not a week goes by where we don't hear of some database being cracked open like a fresh egg on a granite countertop and personal information spilling everywhere for identity thieves to just lap up like a dog who's allowed to be on a kitchen counter and who likes raw eggs. Here are some tips for protecting your identity, Night Vale. Change your computer passwords often. Most of us are not legally allowed to use a computer, but change them anyway just in case you suddenly are allowed to use one someday. Also, wear a mask when in public and black out your house number with spray paint. Finally, most identity thefts occur when databases are not securely managed. So my advice, don't ever end up in a database. This has been Tech News. Coming up after this break, some exclusive clips in my recent 3-hour interview with myself, in which I interrogated myself on my motivations, where I am in life, why I'm not in a different place in life, whose fault that is, and why I said that one embarrassing thing once. Chapter 4. Diane had not seen Evan or Dawn at the office for a while. Days, really. Diane rarely talked to Evan. She sometimes talked to Dawn. They were not friends. They liked each other just fine. Dawn worked in marketing. Diane technically worked in marketing too, but she just ran a database. The database was a list of names. It was also a list of personal details associated with names. It was also a series of personalized photos and histories connected to each name. It was fun to take each life and compact it to a single numerical ID instead of subtables. Because while hugely impersonal and reductive, when combined with tens of thousands of other numerical IDs and their hundreds of thousands of sets of subtables, a database could tell you a lot about how people behave. Sometimes, when she had a little extra time, she often had some extra time at work, Diane would look up information about people in her database. She would do research to find stories or photos or videos about them and index those data in their files. This wasn't necessarily helpful to anyone so much as it was a good way to get to know people. Between her work and raising Josh, she had limited time to make new friends or go on dates. When the marketing department needed data from Diane's database, they could use extremely personal information in their mailings to not only customize a sales pitch to that person, but to also let them know We care about you so much that we looked up everything we could find about you in real life. Customers were often so flattered by this gesture that they would send thank you notes like, "How did you find this all out?" or "Who are you people?" or "I have never told anyone this fact, so how did you know?" Diane's boss, Catherine, read these letters and would sometimes let Diane know how happy everyone was to receive their marketing mailings and what a valuable asset Diane was to their company. Sometimes Diane wanted to ask Catherine what their company actually sold, but she knew it was not her place to ask a question like that. Most people in Night Vale know that there is information that is forbidden or unavailable, which is almost all information. Most people in Night Vale get by with a cobbled-together framework of lies and assumptions and conspiracy theories. Diane was like most people. Most people are. Her desk was not in the same set of cubicles as the rest of the staff. Her desk was down the hall next to the server room. Her office outsourced their IT help, so it was just Diane alone near the constant hum of the servers. This was nice because Diane could do personal work or make personal calls when she wanted. She rarely did this, but it was certainly nice to have the freedom to do what you want, when you want, especially if you are not the type to abuse this freedom. Diane was not the type to abuse this freedom. But because her desk was far away from everyone else, she often felt out of the loop. She was certainly invited to participate in regular office activities like low-stakes betting pools on major sporting events, the Super Bowl, the Absurd Bowl, knife ball, poetry, etc., or birthday cake or going-away parties, where the exiting staffers would take swings at a piñata filled with bees. But she was not part of the normal casual conversation of office life. She did not discuss the latest news topic each morning. Diane did not experience this camaraderie with her coworkers. She knew Martellus had a baby last year. She knew Tina liked to cross-stitch prayers written in long, forgotten languages. She knew Ricardo distrusted birds, but her interactions were limited by office geography. She could have made an effort over the years to leave her desk and engage with her coworkers, but she had not done this. She was not shy, but maybe lazy socially, not willing to seek out situations and connections that were not already part of her routine. Or maybe she was shy. How does a person discover whether they are shy if they never have time to meet new people? She worried often that without another parent to provide a different example, Josh would learn only her shyness, and, in fact, he seemed to have trouble making and relating to friends. But better, she supposed, that he learn awkwardness from her than learn anything at all from his father. Diane took the job at 6 years ago because her job at the counter of Big Rico's Pizza was not making enough money to raise Josh on her own. The company took Diane because they needed someone who understood databases. Diane did not understand databases, but she figures things out quickly, so she lied to get the job. The job market in Night Vale is difficult, what with the mysterious hooded figures already doing many tasks, parking attendant, cartographer, dog watcher, that are more traditionally done in other towns by humans for pay. Like most citizens in Night Vale, Diane found this situation frustrating, but was also gripped with an unspeakable trembling terror that kept her from complaining about it. Her first weeks on the job often involved her working from home and teaching herself database management. This was difficult because she did not yet have a license to turn on her computer at home, plus it took her attention away from Josh. Josh had tried to talk to her during those early days of her work, something about a concert he wanted to go to, and she had told him that she was busy and to go away. She needed the job more than she needed Josh to like her. Later, she understood databases, having become the person she'd lied about being, and could get all of her work done during work hours. When people asked her what she did for a living, Diane would say, "I work in an office, what do you do?" And then she would guide an interesting conversation about their lives, or she would talk about Josh. Raising Josh was what she did for a living, and the office work just allowed her to do that. Diane never really spoke to Evan at work. She had seen him many times. They had shared comments at birthday and piñata parties like, "Good cake, right?" or "Champagne at work, great," or "The sky seemed especially vast and unending this morning," the usual chit-chat. She didn't even notice right away that Evan was not at work. Same with Dawn, but as days passed, their absence overtook the mundane humdrum of office talk. Some thought Evan and Dawn had run off together. Diane was not comfortable enough with her coworkers to shame them for their gossiping. Some speculated that Evan had left his family, that he had a secret life. Some thought he might just be going through personal issues. Some thought he had died and no one had caught the body yet. Catherine, the division head, called a meeting to discuss the pair's absence. It was mostly practical, as they had work that needed to get done. Someone offered to drive over to their homes to check on them. Catherine said that would be fine. Diane almost forgot, or rather almost never thought of Evan, but she was thinking of Evan a lot one morning. Evan was thinking of her too. Diane looked up that morning. Evan stood a few feet from the front of her desk. He was wearing a tan jacket. His belt was a darker brown than his shoes. His hair was recently cut. His face was clean and smooth. He was smiling, silent. He was not smiling like one smiles at a coworker or friend. He was smiling like one smiles for a photo in front of a touristy monument. His teeth were white, or they were almost white. One, his left upper bicuspid, was a little farther forward than any other tooth. His teeth were not white, but they were close. He was looking toward Diane. He was not looking at Diane, but in her vicinity. She could see his pupils. They were not dilated. They were dots. He was looking toward Diane, but his glance seemed to stop just short of where Diane was. He was smiling. Diane said good morning to Evan. Evan turned his head slightly. "It's good to be back," he said. "Where's Dawn?" Diane asked, emphasizing the noun. "Where is Dawn?" Evan asked, emphasizing the verb. His teeth were stained and crooked. "Is everything okay, Evan?" Diane asked. Evan stopped smiling and moved his left foot toward her without putting his weight on it. Diane's phone rang. Evan extended his left arm without bending his elbow. He kept his eyes on the point just in front of Diane. Diane's phone rang. Evan extended his fingers. He bent his right knee, still without putting any weight on his left foot. Diane's phone rang. In his fingers was a slip of paper. A small bead of sweat formed along his upper lip. He was not looking at her. Diane's phone rang. Between rings, Diane could hear Evan's belabored breathing. His whole body was vibrating from the muscular strain. Evan set the small slip of paper on the desk. There was writing on it. Diane's phone rang. She grabbed the receiver, interrupting its full ring. "Diane Creighton," she shouted into the phone. "Hi, Diane, it's me, Evan," said the tinny voice in her ear. "Evan?" Evan kept smiling. Unspeaking, he released the paper. "I can't make it into work today, Diane," Evan's voice on the phone said. "Can you tell Catherine that I can't make it into work today?" "Evan," Diane repeated. Evan stood up, breathed deeply in through his nose and deeply out through his mouth. "I am not able to come into work today, Diane. Do you understand me?" said the voice on the phone. "Yes, I think." Evan smiled again. He looked at Diane. She saw the slip of paper on her desk. She could not read what it said. "Am I being clear, Diane?" "Evan, I don't know. Where are you? Where are you right now?" "I can't make it in today." Diane stared at the slip of paper on her desk. Evan looked toward Diane, smiling. Then he turned, no longer looking toward Diane, but likely still smiling. He walked quickly away from her desk, turning the corner and heading down the hall, out of sight. "Evan, hello? Tell Catherine." Click, the phone said. Diane hung up. She looked down at the slip of paper on her desk. It was not there. She hurried to Catherine's office. On the way, she saw Dawn. "Hey, Dawn, where have you been?" "Hi, Diane. I was homesick for a couple of days. Feeling a lot better, though." "Good. We were missing you around here. Say, did you see Evan this morning?" "Who?" "Evan." "Who is Evan?" "Evan McIntyre. Works in sales." Sits in that cubicle right there. Diane turned and pointed in the direction of Evan's cubicle, but instead of a cubicle, there was a fern and an empty chair beneath a framed photo of a cloud. She wasn't sure which cloud it was. I don't ever remember anyone named Evan ever working here, Dawn said. Diane looked toward the cloud, not at it, just short of it. Dawn smiled. Her teeth were white. You okay? The cloud did not say anything.